So 2 lessons today. One is intro to pivot tables and one is working with more advanced pivot tables. So what is a pivot table exactly? Well, you're going to find out it's very similar to filtering, which we did last week. Remember when we filtered the databases, we made it a table and then we got those little drop down arrows and we were able to use that golf tee or use the golf tee to filter different things out. So if we had a long list of data on one worksheet and we filtered it, it would cut out or hide some of that information we didn't need to see at the moment. Well, that's good and all, but sometimes there's always that possibility that you're going to delete or miss stuff when you're dealing with the entire database and you're manipulating that database. Okay, so what pivot tables do is it will filter things onto a new worksheet tab. So you're never really messing up or even touching the main database. You're building from that new tables on new worksheet tabs. Okay, so let's get into Intro to Pivot Tables. Open up the practice document, save a copy to your OneDrive in the cloud, and rename it last name Pivot 21. Last name Pivot 21. Okay, so we're going to set the stage here. What is our job? And every year I teach this. I'm always not prepared as much as I want to be because I wanted to go in and change all of the names here to like Jim Halpert and Dwight Schrute and Andy Bernard because the role you guys are playing is you're all Michael Scott. You're the regional manager at Dunder Mifflin, and you're actually tracking and evaluating the salespeople and the sales for your company. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a nice long database that's already been converted into a table, which I know it's a table because look, I have table design, content specific menu up at the top. It's already been sorted, so the salespeople's names have been grouped together. That's fantastic. Okay, but what you're doing, you're Michael Scott, and you're doing a good job for once. You're just looking at how your salespeople are performing. Are they doing a good job? Also, you want to look into other things and evaluate things like the regions of the country where our salespeople are making their sales. What regions of the country are we getting the most business in? The next columns over are a little bit more specific. Okay, so we have account numbers, which would be like the different companies that these salespeople are working with, how much their last orders were, and in what month those orders took place. So our job as the regional manager is to track sales and track our salespeople. And we're doing ourselves a good little evaluation here of the first quarter of the year, 3 months. We're only looking at January, February, and March sales. Why would we want to do something like this if you're a manager of some kind of company that's in sales? Well, it's the same reason why a good teacher would look at student assessment grades. Because you're trying to get better, okay? You're trying to look for maybe weaknesses, even strengths. You want to see what's working and what's not working so that the company can succeed and keep evolving. That's your job today. And we're going to filter through this data without making any changes on this original piece. Okay? So the first part, this intro to pivot tables, is not too hard. We'll work alongside with a video, and then we'll move on to a more advanced pivot tables lesson where you're really going to have to be good listeners. So kids at home, if you guys cannot hear the video, or if you're having any difficulty hearing me, please speak up immediately. Okay, so I know because it's super important that you hear the steps how to do this. Okay, here we go with intro to pivot tables.
Miss Moss.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for better.
Question.
I have to leave at 11:30, so I just wanted to make sure you were recording the meeting.
I'm recording it. It'll be posted.
Thank you.
Maybe not until a little bit later because I post all mine on YouTube, so it takes a minute for that to all process. But it'll be there. I'll put the link on the main page.
Okay.
life.
One of the best things about Excel is the fact that a single worksheet can hold so much information. In fact, you could fill billions of cells if you needed that much room. A file with that much data could get pretty overwhelming, but there's a feature called pivot tables that can help. Pivot tables let you summarize and manipulate your data without actually changing anything in the worksheet. Let's take a look at how they work. In this example, I have some company sales data with columns for the salesperson, region, account, order amount, and month. And I need to find the answer to a very specific question. What is the amount sold by each salesperson?
Okay, so Michael Scott, this is what you're working on first. You want to know, of all of your salespeople, how much are they in total selling? Okay, you're trying to see who's maybe the best salesperson. They're going to get like the Dundee Award or something.
Because each salesperson has data on more than one row, I'd normally have to add these up in order to find the answer. But a pivot table can do this for us automatically, which will make the task much easier. First, you need to select your data. You can just click any cell if it's formatted as a table. Otherwise, you need to select all the cells yourself, and don't forget your column headers. When you're ready, go to the Insert tab, then click the Pivot Table command. You'll usually want to place your pivot table on a new worksheet, so make sure this option is selected. Then click OK, and a new sheet will appear. Over on the left is our blank pivot table. It's okay that there's nothing there yet. To the right is a list of fields that have actually been pulled from our column headers. This is where we control what is or isn't displayed in the pivot table.
Okay, so let's create a new sheet. You guys can see down here at the bottom of the video, hopefully, that we have our first quarter sales tab, and then when we start or insert a pivot table, it goes on to a new worksheet tab. Let's do this on our document. Okay, in case you were unable to follow with the video, the very first thing you need to do in order to insert a pivot table is you have to have an active cell on the main table. Meaning like one of these kind of green shaded cells has to be active. You have to click on it. If you have your cursor out somewhere out here and you activate a cell that's off of our table, you're not going to be able to get any information on a pivot table because it's trying to analyze nothing. That's why you have to come in and click on something. Okay, so we're clicked in here. We're going to go into our ribbon to the Insert menu. All the way on the left side of this ribbon is the Pivot Table command. Give it a click. Your computer will, by default, select the entire table. Okay, there might be times where you have multiple tables on a sheet. You don't need to worry about that, but just always double check that the correct data has been selected. And then we do want our pivot table to open up a new worksheet. So keep that bubble filled next to the location where you want it placed on a new worksheet. Click OK. Now down at the bottom, we have our first quarter sales tab and a sheet 1 tab. Okay, this is where we're going to be able to start doing our filtering. And if you look over here on the right side of your screen, this is where you're going to find all of the fields on how you want to set up your pivot table. What stuff do we want to filter? Okay, remember what the question was, Michael Scott? What was the total amount sold by each salesperson? Think about that in your head. How would you want that to show up on a worksheet, on a spreadsheet? If you're trying to get all of the salespeople and the total amount of sales, what would that look like in your brain? Think about it, and let's see if the way that you predicted is actually how it's going to turn out.
But before we continue, let's take another look at that question. What is the amount sold by each salesperson? This question tells us exactly which fields to use to find out the answer: salesperson and order amount. All you have to do is check the box next to the field, and it'll be added to one of the areas below, in this case, the rows category. Another method is to drag and drop the field into place. We'll put this one under Values. If we go back to the pivot table, now we can see the information we were looking for. In other words, the amount sold by each salesperson. So our
Is this kind of what you pictured it would be like? You would want to see the list of the names and then the sum of their orders over to the side. Okay, so again, how we make that happen. These different labels that you see over here are just the column headers that were at the tops of our main database columns. You see that? Okay, so we're going to, she said to click on them and it'll go somewhere, but you're never really sure where. I always suggest to drag the different column headers down. Okay, so you're going to click on the salesperson column header here and then bring it down to the rows field so that we've now created a row for each of our employees. Okay, then we want to know how much they sold. So that's talking about their order amounts. If we pull the order amount down into the values section, it automatically creates an Excel function. These numbers here would automatically update and change if anything on this original database got changed. If we went back in and we found out that in March, Michael Brennan had like a late sale, it really bumped up and went to like $800, it doubled this. If we changed it here on the main database, our pivot table would automatically update and always be accurate. That's very cool, and that's why functions are so important. Okay, so when you were thinking about like how you wanted to lay this out, maybe you were picturing it, rows with the names and then the amounts next to it. But if you weren't sure how to set it up and you moved something into the wrong spot, I mean, you move the order amounts into the columns and you're going to be like, this gives me no information. So what do? You just move it to another place. And you keep scooting the stuff around until it actually makes sense. That's the cool part about this, is you can't mess it up. Just knowing the two different types of information you want to include is all you need. Then you can pull the stuff around until it looks right on the page. Tiana.
Can you like go over how to get the table again?
Yeah. So back on our original tab down here, you have to click somewhere on the data. So anywhere that there's like a green shaded cell, click on it. Then you're going to go into the Insert Ribbon menu. And all the way on the left is the Pivot Table command. That's going to give you this pop-up, which by default is exactly what we want anyway, so you could say OK. And that'll open up a new blank sheet for you. Over on the right side, where the pivot table fields are found, you're going to click and drag salesperson down into the rows field and click and drag order amount into the values field. Let's move on, because we're going to keep changing this. Sometimes when you're working, you have that initial idea in your mind, that question you're asking, and that changes. Let's see if we want to change that question. How can we work with the same information?
Question has been answered just by choosing what fields to include. One of the best things about pivot tables is how easy they are to modify, so you can view and analyze different things. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to know each person's monthly sales, not just their total sales. Just drag the month field down here to columns, and this will add a column for each month in the worksheet.
All right, that was a pretty easy thing to add on. So we wanted to know the total orders or amount sold, and we got that. But by pulling the month column header into columns, Now we can even see a breakdown nice and easily of how they did in January, February, March, and then what their grand total was. What's even cool here is we have this entire grand total row at the bottom. If we wanted to, we could see just monthly as a company, how has Dunder Mifflin done with sales in those 3 months. Interesting, isn't it? How in February, the shortest month in the year, we had the highest amount of sales in the first quarter. Huh. Something interesting to think about. Why did we do so well in February? What happened in February? Were we running a promotion that made more people buy? This is what you do when you work and you want to get better. You have to evaluate. Moving on.
If we wanted to know what each region sold, we could take out the month and salesperson fields and then drag region down to rows.
Okay, so we just changed our question, didn't we? Before we were kind of evaluating the salespeople, but now I want to know in the country where we're selling the best. I want to look at the regions and what the total sales are. So to get rid of these labels that we place into fields, you can just click and drag it and put it back into the bucket up here. So let's get months out of columns and get salesperson out of rows. And this time let's drag down region into rows. And we could see north, south, east, and west what the different sales were. We're doing best in the south. A lot of people still printing stuff in the south. Now in the northern states, well, population wise, there may be not as many people who work up in the northern US or whatever, but yeah, I mean, we have to think about what these numbers actually mean.
Each time we change the fields, the pivot table is just combining the source data in a different way, so we can view the information we need. And we're doing all this without adding or changing anything in the original worksheet. You can even experiment by dragging the fields into different areas, but some combinations work better than others.
Don't do this part if you're following her. Don't make these changes because she just goes back to this original part anyway.
For instance, if I move order amount over to columns or rows, you can see that it doesn't really give us any useful data. Since order amount contains numerical values, it really does work best in the values area. Finally, if we click the arrow next to order amount and go to value field settings, we can change the function to something other than sum. Instead, we could count the number of cells, calculate the average, or use any of the other options here. Some of these functions will be more useful than others depending on your data, so that's just something to keep in mind.
All right, so let's give that a try, guys. Let's say now that we've seen the totals in the different regions, I'm really most interested in reporting out what the average amounts of sales are in the regions. So I'm going to go into the values field. And right now what we're looking at here is a function for the sum. I want to change that to average. So I'm going to click on this little down caret arrow. And on this menu that comes up, I'll select this option called Value Field Settings. Now it's giving me all these different function ideas that I can use to, calculate that data. Go ahead and highlight average. And then click OK. All right, so now we see what the average sales are.
Again, please.
Do that again. Okay, so I was down here in this values field. And if you click on that down arrow, that down arrow gives you a menu, and you'll click on Value Field Settings. And in this list of functions, select Average and say OK. Now, do you guys remember in number formatting that we learned how to kind of move the decimal and everything so that we didn't have these like super long obnoxious numbers? So you could highlight the entire column by clicking on column B, go back into your home menu, and let's move our decimal. Is it going to let us do it? Maybe not. I'm sorry, never mind that. Oh, here, you can't highlight the whole column. Like, so let's just highlight cell B6 and click the decimal thing that's pointing the arrow toward the right and move it so that we only have 2 decimal spots. And then we'll do the same thing in B. When we're reporting out data, we want to just round it to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so what I ended up here at the end of my workday was I found out the salespeople and how much they sold in total. I was able to see how much my salespeople sold monthly. I was able to see how much the company sold monthly and in total over the 3 months. And then finally, I looked at the regions. I was able to see how much was sold in the regions and the average amount in the regions. Lots of answered questions. If your pivot table here looks like mine, you're good to go. Save it, add it, turn it into the Intro to Pivot Tables assignment. Does anybody need a repeat or do you have a question before I close out of this document? Awesome. All right, post that one for some easy points. So hopefully you're seeing, like, this is doing the same thing as filtering. It's going through the data and only picking out different parts or pieces that we want. But when we're using pivot tables, we're not even touching the original database. That stays beautifully all well put together without anything hidden or whatever. Okay, we're going to move on to the second lesson, which is a more advanced pivot table. So if you'll please open up that practice document in the Excel desktop app and save it to your OneDrive as last name and then this abbreviation for Advanced Pivots 21. Don't get confused because when you open up this practice document, it almost looks like what you just turned in. Except our ending point was with averages, okay? And what we're looking at here are region totals. So don't get confused. You're on the right thing. But it just starts us at this point. Does anyone need more time before we move on? We might get done early today. Okay, so what's so cool this time is we're going to be doing some more advanced things, find out different ways to filter data, and even how to create charts for visual representation of the data. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, if I'm looking at a spreadsheet with all these numbers, yeah, it's great to have all of this, but it's cramped and it's not exactly easy to, at a glance, make any kind of analysis with this. If you were to take this information and put it into some kind of a chart, a graphic, it's a game changer, okay? So let's pretend, Michael Scott, that you have an appointment with Jan, and Jan wants to see some reports on your first quarter performance of salespeople and other things, okay? And for her, since, you know, you kind of want to flex, and also you're trying to really like put together some good information, we're going to do some more advanced things. Let's follow the video to begin, and then even after the video, I have a challenge for you guys, so follow along.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
In part 1, we talked about the basics of creating a pivot table. In this video, we're going to take a look at 3 more features called report filters, slicers, and pivot charts. Right now, this pivot table is showing us the regional sales totals for all the salespeople in our worksheet. However, I'd like to try removing certain people so we can see how their sales are impacting their regions. We can do this by adding a report filter, which can be used to narrow down the data in your pivot table. First, drag the salesperson field to the filters area. Then look to your pivot table and click the filter that's been added to the upper right corner. Next, check the option that says Select Multiple Items. Now we can check or uncheck the salespeople above, depending on who we want to include. I'm going to remove Michael Brennan, Richard Dumlau, and Shannon Thompson. When you're ready, click OK, and the filter will be applied.
Alright, so let's try this out. Okay, we're going to apply a filter because let's say like we want to show what the sales look like if we took out our top 3 performers. Okay, so like we pull out Jim, Dwight, and Andy from our sales team. I want to see how everything is going without them. Maybe Jan wants me to make cuts and I have to decide based on the lowest performing salesperson. Okay, so we're on our worksheet here, and they said that how we're going to get a filter to kind of get rid of some people is by pulling the salesperson column header into the filters field. Now we even see that this filter up here, it's encompassing all of our data. See how it's over all of it, right? When I click on the down arrow, it opens up my little filtering box. Now on mine, I can see all of the names, but I think like on some people's screens, it might be too small and you don't see all the names. If that's the case, when you hover your mouse over the bottom right corner of this box, you can expand it and make it a little bit bigger. So as it is right now, I can't like click on everybody, right? So if I go into the select multiple items option and click that checkbox, now I can pick who I want to include or disclude from this analysis. Okay, so they said we want to take out our top 3 people. I'm going to deselect Michael Brennan, which happens to be the name of Miss Moss's sophomore year homecoming date. We're getting rid of Richard Dumlau. And we're going to remove Shannon Thompson. Okay, make sure you've removed or deselected, unchecked those 3 people. Michael Brennan, Richard Dumlau, Shannon Thompson. Then say OK. And you'll notice that now the north and the west regions have disappeared.
Yeah. How do you get to like that point where you can like delete them?
Did you pull salesperson into the filter section? Okay, then you click on the little drop down arrow up at this top where it says salesperson.
Alright.
Do you see here?
Oh yeah.
You click that and you get the drop down box. Then click the check mark next to select multiple items so that you can get all these check boxes. You're deselecting Michael Brennan, Richard Dumlau, and Shannon Thompson. Who has the hiccups? That's cute. Okay, so we got that done, and now we're just looking at the east and south regions because those are the 2 regions where the rest of my salespeople are working. What's next?
In this case, that means the totals have changed, and 2 of the regions have also been filtered out based on the people that we unchecked. If you like the way filters work, you might want to try adding a slicer next. Slicers make filtering even faster and easier by giving you access to the filters in their own separate pane.
Okay, so what she just said, we're going to do some more filtering, but if you use this little graphic that's called a slicer. It keeps it open and it's nice and kind of just right in size. It keeps it right on your worksheet and you could click on that instead of opening another kind of like filter row that we put at the top. Okay, these slicers, I think they're adorable. They're just colorful and cute, but can make changing what you see in your tables and charts just so much easier. Okay, so follow along and then I'll walk you through it again on how to insert a slicer.
First, make sure you're on the Analyze tab, then click the Insert Slicer command. A dialog box will appear where you can check the filter you want. We'll use Salesperson like before. Now we can just click the salespeople we want to see without having to go to the filtering menu. You can even select multiple adjacent people by clicking and dragging your mouse. To select more than one non-adjacent item, hold Control on your keyboard while you click. As you can see, the pivot table changes each time to reflect the data you've selected. The last thing I'd like to show
Okay, let's insert a slicer. It is adorable, isn't it? Look at that little colorful little graphic there to help us click around on stuff. Okay, so make sure that you have your cursor somewhere and you've activated a cell somewhere on your pivot table. So click one of these cells right here. We're going into our content specific menu called Pivot Table Analyze. And in the filter group, you'll find a command that says Insert Slicer. Click on that. It wants to know which one of our columns of data do we actually want to filter and have a slicer made for. You can do multiple ones, but we're today just going to work on salesperson. So select the checkbox next to salesperson and say OK. This is another one of those things that might show up too small for you, so you could always hover over this frame button at the bottom right corner of your slicer, click and drag to expand the size. And this is a thing that you can move around on your screen, so it's not in the way of your data. Okay, so what I'm looking at right here, the highlighted names in blue are the only names that are being included in this data. We know this because we already did that filter up top and got rid of Michael Brennan, Richard Dunlow, and Shannon Thompson. But let's say that as I'm talking to Jane, she wants to put them, Jan, talking to Jan in my meeting, and she wants to put those people back in, but wants to remove Kathy and Melissa. Maybe she wants to see how we do without them because she doesn't like their attitude or something. It's like maybe we could cut Kathy or Melissa. You know how Jan is. Okay, so if we wanted to select multiple names, you have to hold the Control key on your keyboard while you click. So as you're clicking on the names, hold Control, and we're going to select everybody except Kathy and Melissa. Hold Control on your keyboard and click on all of these names except Kathy and Melissa. So as you can see, because we have functions here, our numbers get updated automatically as we click and change who we're including in the pivot table. Looks good. The thing about it is like, yeah, it looks good and all, but it's just a little bit hard to actually come up with an easy analysis looking at these cramped up numbers. What if you want to do this differently and see it in a chart?
you is a neat feature called pivot charts. Pivot charts are basically the same as regular charts, except they show whatever is in your pivot table. To get started, click any cell in your pivot table, then go to the Insert tab, and click the Pivot Chart command. A dialog box will appear where you can select the chart type you want, then go ahead and click OK. Now any changes you make to the pivot table will show up in the pivot chart as well. For example, let's see what happens.
So so much easier to know what you're looking at when you just see a little graphic. I mean, clearly the south is destroying the north here. The west is kind of intermediate. But how nice to just have a quick at a glance graphic to help you come through analysis. Let's do that part together. So the first thing we want to do is come back, click on your data in the table, and we're going to insert in the ribbon and go to the charts group. One thing she didn't show you guys on the video is, yeah, we have the overall pivot chart command here, but maybe do you guys all have these little icons that are showing types of frequently used graphs? You can always use those two to make your selection of what kind of graph you want to create. But since we're just learning this first time, let's go into the pivot chart actual command icon so you can see all of these options. I mean, just amazing that in a click, you can create all these different types of charts with the data that we're looking at. I mean, you get a preview of what it would be like if you click on them. Some of these, I don't even know what they are. They don't necessarily work with the data we have today, but a box and whisker chart? I want to learn how to use that. Sounds cool. Or like a waterfall chart or a funnel chart. Okay, but what we're going to do today is a column chart. And this was one of the terms on your Quizlet as well. So I select column chart from kind of our styles bar over on the left. And after I do that, they give me these 7 options of what type of column chart I want to use. When you hover over them, just like in most of the applications, it'll give you a definition of the icon. So we're going to go here with the 3D clustered column. Click on that, gives you a preview, and then say OK. Now that I have all these different little windows here, I'm going to kind of arrange things. I'm going to put the slicer off to the side so that my chart is taking up a little bit more space. Looks good. Something to notice, guys. This area on the right of our screen, where we have all of the different column headers, when you select the chart here, meaning you've clicked on it and it's within the frame, this section is called the pivot chart fields. If you click back over on your pivot table, this section becomes the pivot table fields. You see what I'm talking about? Like when you select different parts, you're going to have different options over here. Okay, let's see. We're going to make some changes and look at different data here. Let's see what she wants us to do next.
Happens when we move these fields around a bit, so we can view each person's monthly sales data. With a pivot table, a pivot chart, and a slicer, we can look at the data in so many different ways, all without changing or deleting any of the original content. It's a great way to find whatever information you're looking for, or you can just experiment to see if you discover something new.
Right? When you're in the middle of a business meeting and you're talking about your employees, you may just want to only show one person at a time. When you have all of this stuff available, like a slicer to filter names, and you have the chart, as you're clicking through in real time, the visual you're getting is like going to help you answer questions, make an analysis or an evaluation. How cool. Okay, so let's go back into ours and only select, well, first of all, we had to move month into the legend, right? So let's do that first. Let me get back on sheet. So while you're on your pivot chart and you have your pivot chart fields available, we're going to pull month into legend because we wanted to see monthly sales. So we had to include all 3
Miss
months.
Mom,
Yes.
how do you like open pivot chart fields?
You just click on the pivot chart.
I am, but it's like not opening up.
Okay, then what you're going to do is up at the top in the ribbon, click on your Analyze menu. And all the way on the right, there should be a Show Hide Group. And make sure you click on Field List.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we got this right. And then what, did they change anything else? Nope, that's all good. So we have to change our people, right? The final product up there is only showing us, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong thing, that's why it's confusing. We only want to see William Davis, Richard Dunlop, and Tia Flores. Davis, Dunlop, and Flores. So on my slicer, I'm going to click on Davis, hold control, click on Dunlop, and click on Flores. Did they take region out of here? Like why? Okay, we get region out. Salesperson down. There we go. So your final product, guys, should be like what you see up on my screen. Where your pivot chart fields, we have month in the legend field, salesperson in the axis, and the order amount in the values. On your slicer, hold control and only select William Davis, Richard Dunlop, and Tia Flores. In our final conversation, we were comparing these three salespeople, and I'm going to say that Richard Dunlop needs help. I mean, he just is not really performing well. Do y'all have that? Okay, the next thing I want to show you guys what to do here. Down below in the worksheet tabs, whenever you open up a new sheet, it's going to just call it sheet in whatever number tab it is. I want to customize this because at some point I might have like 50 tabs down there, and I want to be able to look at the tabs and know what I'm going to open up when I click on it. So to rename this tab, you can simply double click on where it says sheet 1 and type over it with the name you want to name it. So we're going to name this one Pivot 1. Double click on it, and you could backspace or just type over, and let's rename it Pivot 1. All right, hit enter. Now, what if also I know, like in my meeting, if I have 50 different tabs, but I know Pivot 1 tab is something that is important, and I want to make it a different color, I could do that also. Right click where it says Pivot 1, and then go to tab color, and let's select yellow. When you put a color on your tab, and you're actually...
How do you right click?
Repeat your question, please.
How do you get to it again?
Right click on the tab and select tab color, and then pick your color.
How do you right click?
Right click? What kind of computer do you have? It's if you have a Windows computer, if you click in the bottom right corner of your trackpad, usually that'll do it. Maybe tap both sides. Did you get it?
No.
I can't believe we're learning how to right click on like the last week of the trip. What kind of computer do you have, Amory?
I have the Windows.
Yeah, so if you just click one finger in the bottom right corner of your trackpad, when you're on top of that sheet tab, it doesn't open up a little menu for you?
No.
Okay, we'll have to work on that when I see your device next time. I feel like you've used it before. Okay, moving on. You guys see that the color, it's kind of there when you're on the pivot tab, but it's not super bright. If you click back on first quarter sales tab, now you can really see how highlighted that color is on your tab, right? Okay, so let us go back onto the first quarter sales worksheet tab. We're gonna do a challenge together.
Okay, I got it.
Good. We're gonna do a challenge together outside of the video. Just work with me. Okay, so we're all on first quarter sales. Make sure that you have your cursor on one of these table cells, any of the green cells. You can't be on the white. All right, once you're there, we're gonna go into insert in our ribbon, and on the left, click pivot table. We're gonna start a new pivot table. All of our defaults here look good. It's selected our table, and we're gonna go onto a new worksheet, so say okay. Yours doesn't do those things, hopefully, just mine, because I've used this so many times. Okay, so the things that we're gonna pull, these column headers into fields. We're gonna pull salesperson into rows, and order amount into values. So this is kind of like how we started last time. Okay, while we have this information, just click anywhere on our pivot table. And I want to create right now with all of my employees a pivot chart that's a line chart. So I'm going to go into the insert menu in my ribbon, and I'll go into my pivot chart command. And this time I'm going to select in the styles of charts the line style, specifically line with markers. Line with markers. Then say okay, and you get this cool looking chart. So all of my employees have been listed, all my salespeople, and I can kind of just see them lined up next to each other with these nice points where they kind of land against each other. Very easy at a glance to see who's winning and who's losing. Yes.
Could you make the table one?
Can I make the table or the chart? Yeah, just click somewhere on the table. Go to insert up in your ribbon. In the charts group, go to pivot chart. In the styles here, pick line. And then there are specific types of lines. Pick the one that says line with markers. And then okay. Welcome. All right, very cool. I want to, though, use a slicer and filter this because I want to see all of my employees, but I want to cut out certain regions. So again, make sure that you have selected a cell on our pivot table. Get off of the chart and come back to the table of data. Go to the Pivot Table Analyze ribbon menu and select Insert Slicer in the Filters group. I'm going to get a slicer for region, so select region and say okay. So if I'm giving a presentation and we're just talking about everybody, I mean, like I could click on these individually, I could click multiple ones at a time, and it's just in real time going to update what we're looking at. Okay, but what I want to include in our data right now are only the South and East regions. Only the South and East. So to pick those two, since they're non-adjacent on my list, I have to hold Control on the keyboard. Hold Control and click South and East. So now I'm only dealing with these 5 salespeople. So now that I'm looking at it this way, I've decided, you know what, there's probably a different chart I want to look at, a different visual graphic to see what I'm thinking about in my head, which is I want to see their monthly sales in one column. Like I want one column going up showing me how much total they sold, but break up that column into 3 pieces because I'm talking about 3 separate months. So to change my chart, if you select the chart, just click on it, and you go into the design menu. We're going to change our chart type. When you change your chart type, it brings up our whole pivot chart selection style thing again. We're going to go into column. And this time let's select stacked column. Stacked column. It's given me a preview, which is halfway to the point of where I want it to be. Because now I'm seeing a column for everybody's total sales, but I want these to be stacked up with the different months in different colors. So say okay. And I know what I need to now include that's not down here in my charts field are the months. So I want to include the months in the legend. How cool does that look?
Wow, that's cool.
Isn't that cool? Isn't it fancy? So now I can see these 5 employees and their overall sales broken down into colorized sections for each month. It's really kind of neat to see, like January's at the bottom. So at the beginning of the year, how are they doing? And then the next month in, what did their sales look like? And then how did they finish up the quarter? All of this stuff is helpful information when you're trying to evaluate people or evaluate the company or come to some kind of analysis. If yours looks like mine, you're in a good place, but I want you guys to rename where it says sheet 1, this worksheet tab, let's rename it and call it pivot 2. You don't have to make a color this time. Just rename it pivot 2, save it, add it, and turn it in. You guys will have to use pivot charts on your final project for the Excel final for this class. Okay, you're going to be working with data that I collect from you guys next week. Actual questions I ask you will be incorporated into a database. It's going to be kind of interesting. You can maybe learn something about your classmates. But in that data, you'll have to do these types of steps to create slicers and pivot charts. Anybody need any repeats from this challenge portion? All right, if you added that, turned it in, we are done for the day. Kids at home, I'll see you guys here tomorrow. And we're going to move into some more advanced stuff with using charts. But kids at home, you're free to leave the call when you turn in that second assignment. Have a great afternoon. Bye.